Hi, everyone. We're going to give people a couple of more minutes to get logged on, and then we'll get started. So just sit tight for a few minutes. Hi, folks. We're just giving people another minute or so to get logged on. I see the numbers of people logging in now are starting to go up. So we'll just wait one more minute and then get started. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'll just hand it over for our introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katya, and I'm the Vice President of the Research Skills Society for this academic year. And I'd like to thank you all on behalf of the Society for attending this talk. And I'd also like to thank Patty for delivering this talk on Altmetrics. Before we begin, I'd like to just introduce Patty and also just state the RCSI External Speaker Declaration Policy, which is as follows. The views expressed at this meeting or presentation are the views and ideas of said individual only. They do not necessarily represent the views, beliefs, or attitudes of the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, RCSI. In addition, the referral to any products, services, directions, or advice by any parties at this event do not necessarily constitute an endorsement of any kind by RCSI. So that was the External Speaker Declaration Policy. And now I'd just like to begin by introducing Patty. So Patty Smith is the Senior Engagement Manager at Altmetric and has been with the company since March 2019. Prior to joining the Altmetric team, Patty worked as a research impact librarian at Northwestern University, helping researchers communicate their research impact. So I'll hand over the spotlight to Patty.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so getting started with our presentation today. So first of all, the session is being recorded. So I believe we're going to try and get it up on your YouTube channel. So you can always view the recording there or share it with any other people who might be interested in it. So if you do have any questions throughout our presentation today, feel free to just plop them in the question box that you should see on your GoToWebinar control panel. I'll try and stop a couple times throughout the presentation to take a look at those questions and answer them throughout the presentation. Okay, so first we're going to start with the basics today. And so in the first 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about what altmetrics are, since many of you might be quite new to the topic. Then I'm going to jump into a live demo of the Altmetric Explorer database, which you have access to through RCSI's institutional subscription. And so in there, I'll show you how you can actually discover altmetrics and leverage them and use them in different ways. So starting off with the basics, I'm going to give you an overview of Altmetrics and Altmetric. So first starting off with the difference between Altmetrics and Altmetric, because it can be a little bit confusing. So Altmetrics with a little a is the concept of these metrics, whereas the proper noun, big A, Altmetric, is the company that I work for. So we are a data provider that tracks attention online and presents it to you through a variety of tools that you have access to. But first I'm going to take us through the concept of the little a, Altmetrics, and talk about that a little bit more specifically. I do like to start off with some terminology that I quite frequently use throughout the presentation today, since it might not be the same terminology that you might be used to using. So I talk about outputs or research outputs quite a lot throughout the talk today. So when I say output or research output, I'm simply talking about an individual research product. So oftentimes this is going to be a journal article or paper, but it could be a book or a non-traditional research output like a data set or an image or curricula or a patient handout. At Altmetric, we can track all sorts of these different types of research outputs, not just journal articles. So that's why we refer to them as outputs. Then we have a source or source of attention. So this is the place where research is shared online. So different platforms like social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, news outlets, but we also track Wikipedia, patents, policy documents, the list goes on. We have 17 categories of sources of attention that we track, which I'll talk about in just a bit. And then we have our mentions. So these are the actual shares, references to, or engagement with research outputs online. So to bring all three of these terms together in an example, let's say that I'm a researcher and I recently published a paper and I want to share it on Twitter. So my research output, of course, is that paper that I just published. The place where I want to share it, the source, is Twitter, and the actual tweet that I send out counts as that mention to that research output. So hopefully that makes sense. So starting off, I like to go back to the beginning of where this idea of altmetrics came from. So it was in the early 2010s that there was this call to action in the scientific community to start tracking interactions with research beyond just citations and publications and how they're cited and how academics are citing each other. So it was actually October 2010 when the Altmetrics Manifesto was published. And so the reason for this is because research affects many people, but most people and stakeholders are not actually publishing research or doing research themselves, or it might not be their main focus of their job. And so Altmetric attempts to uncover who these people are and where they're discussing research online beyond that academic bubble. And I think a great example of the importance of this is with clinical practitioners. So right now, we're living in the midst of a pandemic, and this is very apparent. So most nurses, doctors, pharmacists, et cetera, they're not doing COVID-19 research themselves, right? But research is certainly impacting how they're making clinical decisions. And so these clinicians are sharing these research findings on Twitter, in the news, in blogs, et cetera. And so Altmetrics offer a way to track all of those important interactions with research online. So here's a very succinct definition of altmetrics. So they are indicators of non-traditional attention and engagement with digitally published research and scholarship. So they're non-traditional in the sense that we're not looking at citations, and instead we're tracking interactions with research publications beyond just citations and how academics are citing each other. So how people are talking about research online. So digging into that a little bit more. So altmetrics, it does stand for alternative metrics. So alternative to those citation-based bibliometrics. So these are data that can explain both the volume and the nature of attention that research has received online. So we can measure how many people have shared or engaged with a scholarly output and where that's happening. And that provides us with evidence of engagement with those diverse audiences and potential downstream impact of that work. And I do like to note that altmetrics are intended to be complementary to citation-based bibliometrics. So we're not trying to compete with or replace, the journal impact factor or the H-index or just the raw citation count. Instead, we want to use all of these metrics together to tell a more complete story about the potential impact that research is having. But one big piece and strength of altmetrics versus those traditional citation-based metrics is the time factor. So it can take a really long time for research to be conducted and a long time for research to be published, and even longer sometimes for research to be cited. So citations are really slow to accrue. It can take 2 to 5 years depending on the discipline that we're looking at. where Altmetrics offer you immediate feedback about the attention that newly published research outputs are getting online. So I think this is really great for early career researchers, especially. So you might not have a very robust research portfolio yet. You might not have tons of citations yet, but you can use Altmetrics to tell kind of that broader story of how your research might be being used and discussed in other ways online. So here is a visualization of part of the life cycle of a research output and how and when attention happens in the digital environment. So we can see the horizontal axis is time and the vertical axis is the volume of attention. So within hours of research being published, you start to see tweets and news outlets talking about that new research. Then kind of as the days go by, people have time to digest that new research. We see blog posts and other commentary appearing, Wikipedia articles being updated with new citations, and then it's generally not until months or years down the line that we see those scholarly citations start to appear. And there are a lot fewer citations compared to some other types of attention, which again is largely due to the fact that it's generally only other academics who are citing research, whereas other types of engagement are open to potentially anyone to participate in. Okay, so far I've been talking more generally about Altmetrics as a concept. Now I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about Altmetric, the company that I work for, and the data and tools that we provide you with. So first off, let's talk about this colorful circular visualization that we see on the screen here over on the right-hand side of the screen. So you may have seen this colorful donut before. So we lovingly refer to this as our Altmetric donut badge. I've heard it called many things, like your whirly thing or your circle thing or your flower. It is called our Altmetric donut. And so if you're browsing online, like on institutional repositories, or perhaps you're on a journal website, you may see this embedded in the journal website in the abstract. So this is our Altmetric badge. So it's our colorful visualization, and inside you see a number, and that is the Altmetric attention score. So first let's talk about the circular visualization, our donut. What does the donut represent? So it's colorful, it's eye-catching, it's pretty to look at, but the colors actually do mean something, and they can tell you a little bit about where this research output has been shared online. So all the different colors of the donut represent a different type of attention or a different source of attention. So we have 17 categories of attention representing thousands of websites that we are tracking online. So unfortunately, at Altmetric, we're not tracking the entire internet. So tamper your expectations. We're not tracking everything online, but we are tracking thousands and thousands of websites for different attention and kind of scouring them to see when research is being mentioned. So of those 17 categories, as you can see here, like I said, they all have a different color represented in that donut visualization. So if I take a look at a donut and it's completely light blue, I can see that that paper, that research output, only has Twitter attention, for example. If I see purple in that donut, I know that it has policy document mentions, red is news, yellow is blogs, so on and so forth. So of these 17 categories of attention, I will note that 4 of them are we're no longer actively tracking. So they're old sources that either don't exist anymore, like Google+, or we're unable to, we don't have permission to track them anymore. So Sina Weibo, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, we have some historic data in the Explorer database, but we're no longer actively tracking those. So I just like to point that out. All right, so that's the Altmetric attention, the donut visualization. But what about the score? What does the score in the middle of that donut represent? So really, at its base level, the score is just an indicator of the amount of attention that a research output has received. It is not an indicator of the quality of that attention. And it is not just a raw count. So this example on the screen here, this does not mean that 1,254 individual people or outlets have engaged with this research output. Instead, it is a weighted score. So on the right side of the screen, you can see a little bit of a breakdown of how that weighting works in the algorithm to calculate the score. So if a research output is mentioned in the news, for example, that will receive more weight towards the score than if it's mentioned on Twitter. But as I said at the beginning of this slide, I really do like to emphasize it's just an indicator of the volume and potential reach that this research output has had, and it's not an indicator of the quality of the attention. So context is really key when we're looking at online attention. We want to look at what people are saying whenever we can, and not just rely on those numbers, not just rely on the Altmetric attention score. And so I have my favorite example of this, of not all attention being positive attention, is this paper that has looking at traditional citations has been cited quite a lot. It has been cited over 1,500 times, and it has a very high altmetric attention score, over 3,300. It's been mentioned in hundreds of news outlets, hundreds of blogs, even been mentioned in policy documents and patents. So my gut reaction looking at the numbers might be that this is a really, really good paper, really impactful paper. It is a very impactful paper, but again, not for a good reason. So this is the infamous retracted Lancet paper linking vaccines and autism. So controversial papers, papers that have been refuted or retracted, oftentimes they're very highly cited, and oftentimes they have a lot of attention online. So they have high altmetric attention scores. And that's not surprising. They're controversial, so they're being talked about in the news. People are talking about them on Twitter. So we really want to make sure we look at why people are talking about something online instead of just relying on that high score as an indicator of quality research. But on the flip side, another reason we want to look past the score and not just rely on scanning and kind of trolling for those high altmetric attention scores is sometimes research that has low scores actually is quite impactful. So this paper is an example from the RCSI author Mary Cannon. So this paper, it has an altmetric attention score of 10. I see, looking at the donut, light blue, so most of that attention is coming from Twitter, but I also see a sliver of purple in that score, and purple is policy documents, if you remember from like kind of that color breakdown on that previous slide. So if I actually take a look at the details of the attention and where this is coming from, I can see that this paper was cited in a report from the World Health Organization on refugees and healthcare and migrant health. So that's directly related to the topic of her paper that she published, and so she might want to take a look at that and see exactly how her paper is influencing this policy document from the World Health Organization. Okay, so I'm going to take a step back here for a second before I start talking about the altmetric products and ways you can start discovering altmetric attention to different research outputs, and I'll see if we have any questions so far. So let me take a moment and see if I have any questions that have come in. Okay, doesn't look like there are any questions yet. So yep, just feel free to plop them in there if you do have any questions. Okay, so how can you start discovering if research has altmetric attention, where people are discussing research online? So we have a few different products available to you. So RCSI has an Altmetric Explorer account. So this is a database with institution-specific data, and you also have access to all altmetric data, kind of the whole altmetric universe, if you will. So that's what we're going to be kind of going over here in just a second. So I'll show you what the Altmetric Explorer database looks like. But we also have free badges for researchers or students as well. So you can embed those donut badges on your personal website or your online CV, for example. If you would like to start using those, you can freely do that. We also have a free API for research purposes. So if you ever decided that you wanted to look at altmetric data and do a research project with it, you can freely have access to that API. And we also have a cool little bookmarklet tool that you can just install on your bookmark in your bookmarks bar. So you can Google Altmetric bookmarklet and you'll be able to install that in your bookmarks bar if you so choose to do that. But you don't have to use any of these free tools because of course you have access to the Altmetric Explorer database with your affiliation with RCSI. So before I jump into a live demo of the database to kind of show you around, I started thinking about, well, how can students use Altmetric Explorer? So first thing is you can track non-traditional research outputs. So at RCSI, you have the RCSI repository where you can upload those non-traditional research outputs that you may have. So, they may have some limits on what you can upload based on their criteria. So you might want to take a look at that link that I put on the slide here and check out what the library kind of allows you to upload and whatnot. But most repositories, you can upload those non-traditional research outputs like, poster presentations or slide decks that you presented at a conference, data sets, etc. So obviously, traditional research outputs are journal articles, but researchers contribute so much more to their field than just those published papers. So like I said, we have data sets, posters, conference presentations, curricula, images, patient handouts. The list really goes on of those non-traditional research outputs. And most of those non-traditional outputs are never cited and you don't get credit for them largely. But if you upload those items to a repository, it makes it much more likely that people will discover it and use it and cite it. And then, so if you you upload these non-traditional outputs to the repository at RCSI, these items will then be given a unique identifier in the form of a handle, and then Altmetric can track the attention that those research outputs might be getting online. So now if you just upload things to a repository and kind of just let them sit there, they probably won't get much attention. Instead, you have to be kind of your own biggest advocate and disseminate that research out to the world. So Twitter is a great way to do that. If you upload something to a repository, if you're presenting something at a conference, for example, definitely be proactive and get on, Twitter is the easiest probably entry into disseminating your research online. Get on there, tweet out about that non-traditional research output that you've uploaded, so then people can start to discover it, share it, and actually use your contribution to that field. And that kind of goes into point number 2 of developing your online presence. So we can use Altmetric Explorer to kind of discover prominent voices online. So again, prominent Twitter voices in different fields. You can find blogs that perhaps you should be reading to really start to develop your online profile. You can also kind of stay on top of trending research in different topic areas, see where this research is being published. So as you start to perhaps create more research that you need to submit for publication to different journals, you can get an idea of which journals are getting a lot of attention online. You can also discover RCSI specific trending research. So perhaps, I don't know, you have a mentor or something and you want to take a look to see what if their research is getting kind of attention online, you can do that as well. And you can, to an extent, use the Altmetric database as a discovery tool just to kind of see literature in different areas, but that's really not the main focus. All right, so I'll hop into the live demo of the database now. So if you've never logged into Altmetric Explorer, again, you do have free access to the database. So I think they have a page on the library website about accessing Altmetric Explorer, but you don't have to go directly to the library. You can go to altmetric.com/explorer and you can create your own login. And so all you have to do is enter in your RCSI email address, and then you'll be able to create a login to Altmetric Explorer. And so you have to use your RCSI email. You can't use your personal email like Gmail or anything like that. So just keep that in mind as you create your accounts. All right, so let me hop into the database really quickly. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the first time you log into the database, you'll see up here at the top, I'm exploring data for all research outputs from Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. We're looking right now just at RCSI affiliated research. So we worked at Altmetric, we worked with RCSI to actually create this institutional view here. So you'll see that we have these little blue tick box. If I start exploring through the database, we have these different tabs up at the top. So all these little blue tick marks that you'll see on some of the different research outputs, you'll know that whenever you see that this is a verified research output from RCSI. So let me go over to the left-hand side of the screen and look at your institution breakdown. Okay, so here we have authors. So it's organized alphabetically, as you can see here. And then we have departments as well. So these are all RCSI affiliated. And I think we're still working to kind of build out this institutional breakdown with you, because I think some of these don't actually have any research outputs in them at this time. But you'll see like the Department of Chemistry, 245 research outputs with mentions. If I wanted to view results to the Department of Chemistry, I could just click view results, and then my search strategy will adjust and I can just view search results from that particular department. But let me just refresh this and go back to the main view. Okay, so like I said, we worked with RCSI to create this view of Explorer. So right now we're only looking at RCSI affiliated research. So we can view that institutional breakdown by looking at this little kind of building Parthenon icon over here. But another way we could do that is by going up to my advanced search. So if I click edit search at the top of the screen here, then my left-hand side of my screen, I have my institution breakdown. So this is another way that you could search for a specific RCSI author. So if I just start typing in a last name, there I could search for Mary Cannon, for example. Or if I wanted to search quickly for a department, again, I could start typing in a department and just view results from that department. So if you're using Explorer to discover trending research specifically affiliated with RCSI, then this would be a good place to start. But if you're really trying to stay on top of just trending research in general, not just affiliated with RCSI research and researchers, you're going to want to search the full Altmetric database. So here in the advanced search up in the upper right-hand corner, we'll see that right now I'm looking at my institution only. But right next to it, you'll see we also have this tick box where we can search the full Altmetric database. So if I click this tick box and run my search here, so now I'm on the highlights tab again, but now I'm searching for all research outputs for the full Altmetric database of over 15 million research outputs with attention. So one thing I do want to clarify is that just like how we're not tracking the whole internet for attention, we have those 17 categories of attention, we're not tracking everything that has ever been published. So you're not going to use Altmetric Explorer to create really advanced literature search strategies, for example. So if I just want to know, well, what's the latest research on, breast cancer research, for example, we're not going to come to Altmetric Explorer to just search for the latest research. For a comprehensive literature search, you'd go to a product like Dimensions, which is one of our sister products, or Pubmed, for example. Instead, our focus with Altmetric Explorer is really tracking outputs that have some sort of attention online, right? So it's not a comprehensive literature database. So that's helpful to keep in mind. So looking at these numbers up here at the top, so we have our total mentions, outputs with attention, and our total outputs tracked. So total outputs tracked is about 30 million research outputs, but only about half of those actually have some sort of altmetric attention. And so a big reason for the gap here is that our customers, such as RCSI, are telling us what all of their research outputs are when we're setting up their database view. So we ingest all of those research outputs and they're searchable in the database, but not all of them have attention online. So we'll tell you how many outputs we are tracking in total, but kind of the number to focus on really is this outputs with attention. So there's about 15.5 million outputs with attention. So let me hop over to my research outputs tab really quickly. And I'm going to sort this list by the lowest altmetric attention score first. So now you'll see, I'm sorting by lowest score first. So now you'll see all these empty donut visualizations with this question mark. We call these ghost donuts. And so these are all papers that we're tracking in the database, but they don't actually have any altmetric attention associated with them. That's just to show you what that looks like. So going back to my main screen here. Okay, so I'm searching the full Altmetric database, but this is 15.5 million outputs with attention. So of course, that's a little bit cumbersome. We might want to narrow down this search a little bit to a field of research or a topic that we're interested in to see what research is trending in that given area. So I'm going to go up to my advanced search again. And as you can see here in the advanced search, there are many, many different ways that we can search and kind of sift and winnow down the search results that we are looking at. So of course, if we're only looking at RCSI, we can search by author or department at the institution. But we also have this publishers, journals, and collections section here. So if I want to look at a particular journal just to see what kind of attention the research outputs in that journal are getting, I could just start typing in a journal title. So like the New England Journal of Medicine, for example. Could craft a search strategy here for those different journals that I might be interested in taking a look at. I can look at open access outputs only. So if I only want to see research outputs that are freely available for me to read the full text of, I could click this little tick box here to limit my search results to open access outputs only. So you can see there's just a lot of different ways to limit my search strategy here. But let's say I want to look specifically at a certain topic. There are really kind of 2 to 3 different ways we can do that. So we do have this keyword search up here at the top. So this is a good way to just do a really quick and dirty search for a keyword or a couple keywords. But the limitation of this keyword search, I do like to point out, because this keyword search does not support Boolean operators. And as you can kind of see in this search bar here, it's only going to search the title, author name, editor name, and or journal title for that specific keyword that you are searching. So it is a bit limited. It's not going to search the author assigned keywords or an abstract search or anything like that. So like I said, good for a quick and dirty search, but you're probably going to miss quite a bit if you do use that keyword search function. Instead, my go-to when I'm looking at a topic in biomedicine is I like to use this Pubmed query function down here towards the bottom of the screen. So if I click this Add a Pubmed query box, so within this box, I can actually directly mirror how I would craft a Pubmed search strategy. So I can use, the same quotes and brackets and mesh terms and all that same syntax you would use in Pubmed directly within this box to craft a Pubmed search strategy. So it's going to search Pubmed for this search. So for example, we'll use a search strategy that's, of course, on everyone's minds right now. We're going to look at a COVID-19 search. And instead of just searching very broadly for COVID-19, I'm going to search for COVID-19 along with pregnancy. So COVID-19 and pregnancy. And if you are curious about, hot and trending topics, of course, like COVID, you don't always have to craft these advanced search queries on your own. I got this one from the Medical Library Association's website, where they have tons of different search queries that you can just take and use and borrow. So definitely check those pages out if you want to learn more about how to craft those advanced search strategies in given areas. Again, I got this from the Medical Library Association's page on COVID-19 search strategies. All right, so I'm going to save my search for COVID-19 and pregnancy. And I'm looking at 897 Pubmed query results. I will note that if you're crafting a quite broad Pubmed query, so if I were to just type in COVID-19, for example, it's going to pull in a lot of results. I think it's about 50,000. So Altmetric Explorer can only process 25,000 results at a time. So you'll get kind of a little red warning message that lets you know it's only going to pull in the most recent 25,000 results. So if you see that, that's what that means. We can only process 25,000 at a time. But in this case, for these about 900 Pubmed query results, we're okay. We don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to run my search. Oops, hang on, go back up to my edit search here. I had it limited to open access outputs only. I'm going to untick that and run my search again. Okay, so there were about 900 results in Pubmed if I were to run this search, but here we can see that of those 900 results, about 612 of them actually have some sort of attention online associated with them. Okay, and then I have my attention breakdown here. So here is where I can actually see, I can hover over any of these bars and I can see where those 120,000 total mentions are coming from. So I can see that most of that, not surprisingly, is coming from Twitter. I can hover over this red, I can see the number of news and blogs, I can hover over the purple and see policy document mentions, etc. So this is attention breakdown is a quick and easy way to kind of get those summary numbers of where people are talking about COVID-19 and pregnancy online. So I'm on the highlights tab right now, and I usually don't spend too much time on the highlights tab. It's really kind of just like a pre-built dashboard of previews of information you can get in all these other tabs up here at the top of my screen. We do pull out some latest news highlights and latest mentions for you, but again, I really don't spend too much time on here. Instead, I prefer to kind of dig into the tabs up at the top of my screen. So let me go over to my research outputs tab. So the research outputs tab is a place where I can go, where I can really easily search each output, each paper kind of one by one. As you'll see in the other tabs as I show you, the other tabs kind of present data in a more aggregate view, but the research outputs, like I said, shows you each paper one by one. And so this view here, our default is looking at the highest altmetric attention score first, and that's the way this list is sorted. But if I click this drop down, which I think in GoToWebinar, I don't think you can actually see my drop down when I open it up, but definitely you'll see it when you go in and play around. But this drop down, I can sort this list in many, many different ways. I can sort by publication date. So if I want to take a look at the newest papers first, let me show you what that looks like. So now my newest publications are going to float up to the top. So we actually have technically papers that haven't actually been published yet. So we have October 2020 here. I accidentally clicked on that. So we can see the publication date, and so we sorted by the newest publications first. We can also sort by source type. So if I want to see, well, which papers have gotten the most news attention, for example, I can sort the list in that way. And so now this paper floats up to the top with over 1,300 total news mentions. So if I wanted to take a look at this paper and look at all of those mentions and the details, I can actually click on the donut or click on that link, and this would open the Altmetric details page for me, where then I can actually view all of the attention that this paper has received online. So on the left, we have our mentioned by, which gives us a preview of that breakdown. We also provide you with citation information as well, because of course people want to know what the citation information is. But we don't take citations into account when we create the donut visualization or the Altmetric attention score. So I like to point that out. But here, if I go up to the top, I have all these tabs where then I can actually explore all of those news mentions in detail. So if I wanted to take a look at this Scientific American paper, so what AIDS taught us about dealing with COVID-19, I could actually just click on this link. I'll be taken to the Scientific American website, and I can see how this paper is actually being cited in that news story. So this one has thousands of news mentions, so we won't go through that full list, but I can also see the blogs that have mentioned this paper, policy documents, Twitter, Facebook, etc. Over here on the right, I can also view citation information. So if I want to take a look at policy documents, for example, that tends to be a popular one because people like to see when their research is actually making an impact on policy. I can actually take a look at the full text of all these different policy documents that this paper is cited in. So let me go back to the summary page. So sometimes people also want to know, well, what does this score actually mean? And this is just a ridiculously high altmetric attention score. As we're seeing on a lot of papers about COVID-19, they're just being shared so much that they have insanely high scores. So this is very, very high. But if I want to know more about what that attention score in context actually means, I can take a look at this attention score in context box over here. And then I can kind of view the breakdown of the score in context in many different ways. So I tend to tell people to not use this first box because it compares this paper to all research outputs. So it's comparing them to over 15 million other research outputs. So it's not a very specific comparison. So I tell people don't really look at that. Instead, maybe look at these other options of comparing this paper to other papers published in that same journal, looking at outputs of a similar age, so published within 6 weeks on either side of this paper, or looking at publications of similar age from that same journal. So that's the attention score in context. But I really like the research outputs tab because we can sort this list in so many different ways. So if I wanted to sort by maybe tweets, which papers have gotten the most Twitter attention, we can also sort in that way. We can also sort by time frame as well. So if I wanted to sort by the papers that have gotten the most attention in the past month, for example, I can sort in that way. And then now we'll see that this paper floats up to the top with 2,500 mentions in the past month for transplacental transmission of SARS-CoV-2 infection. So yep, so I really like the research outputs tab, as I said. You can also save any searches that you craft in Altmetric Explorer. You'll always see this save search over here on the right-hand side of the screen. And if you want, you can also download the results as a CSV file too. You can also view this page view the results as a list over here on the left-hand side. So if I toggle over to view results as a list, now I can actually see different affiliations, so different universities, hospitals, institutions that are authors on this paper, and I can see the subject areas in which this paper is classified. And so if I came across any paper that was actually had someone from RCSI that was an author on this, I'd actually also see the RCSI author and the department that researcher is in as well. All right, I'm gonna hop on over to the timeline tab now. So I think the timeline tab is pretty cool because, as the name suggests, you can kind of view attention over time. So obviously, most of the attention to COVID-19 and SARS-related papers is happening, February 2020 and beyond. But we can zoom, so we're looking at all time right now, but we could zoom to the last month in attention if we wanted to just view that. I can use the scroll bar down at the bottom of the screen to look at a very specific point in time if I so choose. But as you can see, it's these charts are really dominated by the light blue, which is Twitter attention. So if I really just wanted to look at news attention, for example, or blogs or policy, we could just look at those kind of one at a time. So if I wanted to see this kind of spike in news attention from July 16th, 2020, those 382 news mentions, well, what paper or papers caused that to that massive spike in attention? I could actually click on that bar, and I'll be taken over to my mentions tab where then I can see. So it looks like it was, again, this paper probably that was getting a lot of attention in the news there. So that's a quick view of the timeline tab. Let me go to the demographics tab now. So I like the demographics tab as well. It kind of shows you these heat maps of attention online. So where in the world on Twitter people are talking about this research. You can hover over any of the countries and get kind of a breakdown of the total number of tweets and unique tweeters from those given countries. And we can do that same thing for get those heat maps for Facebook, news, and policy. I will note that for Facebook, a lot of people think, so for Twitter, we're tracking just all of Twitter. It's kind of a fire hose of data. A lot of people think it's the same for Facebook, but it's actually not. It's a curated list of Facebook pages that we are tracking. So if you, for example, had a personal Facebook page and you shared research on your personal page, we're not going to be able to track that through Altmetric. We can only track public-facing Facebook groups on our curated set kind of list of Facebook walls and groups that we are tracking. So we can't track anything that is a private Facebook page. So I do like to note that. That's our demographics tab. Going over to the mentions tab, so this is kind of just a massive scrolling feed of all of the mentions to COVID-19 and pregnancy papers. So as we can see, so Twitter's up at the top. We're probably going to see just a lot of tweets since there's just so much going on Twitter. But if I really just wanted to take a look at, well, where has this research been mentioned in the news, I could limit to just news and maybe policy as well. Click apply. And then my feed will readjust accordingly. Looks like it's being quite slow right now, so maybe we won't look at that. But I could also search for a very specific set of news sources. If you know you're really only interested in looking at, well, what's been mentioned on the BBC, for example, I can search for BBC News as a news outlet. Click apply. And now I will only see news stories from BBC News. So you can craft a long search strategy of maybe high profile news sources that you kind of want to pay attention to, or we could actually also get kind of crafty. Maybe I want to see Twitter users just from Ireland or something like that. So we could actually search by location as well. So maybe this could give you an idea of perhaps folks that you might want to, local people that you might want to follow on Twitter. So you can do a lot in the mentions tab. We don't have a ton of time to go over that right now, but I'm going to go now to the mention sources tab. So the mention sources tab is kind of it's a bit of an influencers type of tab. So it's going to show you what sources of attention are mentioning research in this area most frequently. So as you can see, we have Yahoo News and MSN are coming up at the top with 313 mentions, 220. We also have some journal web pages that are mentioning this research quite a lot, or Facebook pages, excuse me. We have Twitter accounts for different journals. So we can see the total number of times they've mentioned research in this area. And if it's a Twitter account, we can see the total number of followers they have. So again, just like in the mentions tab, we can limit to a certain source. So maybe I want to look at all Twitter users. So this can be a good place to go. So if I'm interested in this topic, I craft my search strategy, go to my mention sources tab and limit to Twitter. Now I can get kind of an idea of maybe those prominent voices in a given field that I should be following and engaging with online in order to develop kind of your online presence. And as you start to publish more research, as you're engaging with them and kind of, there's a bit of a reciprocity practice on Twitter. As you start engaging with other people, commenting on their work, liking their work, retweeting it, they're more likely to actually do that for you as well. So this can be a place you might want to go to see some Twitter voices that you want to start following to see what they're saying in these given areas that you might be interested in. I think another good one to do is also to do a search for blogs as well to see if there's any niche blogs or anything like that that you should be reading, should be paying attention to in a given research area. So that could be something that you want to take a look at too. And then finally, we have our journals tab. And so here we can see the journals in the area of COVID-19 and pregnancy that are publishing in that topic most frequently, and we can see which journals are getting the most attention online. And so as you start to publish research and decide where you should submit your work for publication, this can be another kind of thing you might want to add to the list as you decide where you want to publish your research and submit. Is you can take a look at the journals that are actually getting a lot of attention online, journals that might be helping to disseminate their authors' research more widely and maybe take a more active role in that. So I can actually sort this list by total number of mentions, kind of scroll through here to see which journals are getting the most attention online. So we could sort by news as well, blog, policy, any of these column headers, you could actually sort this list by. So it's a quick view of that journals tab. Okay, so one thing that I mentioned on the slide deck is we can also track, so far we've really been looking at traditional research outputs like journal articles, but we can also track attention to non-traditional research outputs as well. And I think that's a really powerful use of Altmetric Explorer, and I've used it quite a lot in my own personal career. And so it's something that I like to emphasize, and something I'll just show you an example of how I've done this in the past to try and get credit for those non-traditional research outputs that you might not otherwise be able to kind of track attention to. So let me go up to my edit search here. And I'm going to keep it on the full Altmetric database, but I'm going to clear out my Pubmed query. And I'm going to put in a title of a conference presentation that I gave when I was working at Northwestern University as a librarian. And as a librarian, I wasn't really, I was faculty, but I wasn't tenured faculty, so I wasn't responsible for, publishing in journal articles or anything like that. So I didn't have to do that. So most of my kind of material that I wanted to track was really non-traditional research outputs like conference presentations or curricula or guides or things that I was creating. But all those things don't really get attention online unless I take the initiative for them to get that type of attention. So let me take a look at this paper. So I ran a search for this conference paper or conference presentation that I gave at a conference a couple years ago. And so it was telling your science story, past, present, and future use of altmetrics in an academic library setting. So let me take a look at Twitter. So what I did is, before I went to this conference, I had my slide deck that I was going to present at the conference. I uploaded it to my institutional repository. So again, remember to take a look at RCSI's repository so you can start doing this with your own non-traditional outputs. So I uploaded my slide deck to my repository. It was minted, in my case, with a DOI. And so when I got up to present at that conference, I linked everybody. I tweeted about it before the conference started. I linked everybody to that repository page. And so in real time, as I was presenting at the conference, people were tweeting about it, about the presentation. They were able to actually view my slides, download them, use them at a later date. And I was actually able to track that online attention that my conference presentation was getting in real time. And so I was able to then use this 25 tweeters. It doesn't seem like a lot, but this paper otherwise, or this conference presentation would otherwise have never gotten any sort of traction. I wouldn't have had any way to prove that this conference presentation actually got some sort of attention. So I was able to put this in my CV, use it in my kind of annual review, say, hey, look, I went to this conference and look at all this great feedback I got about this presentation that I gave. So I definitely encourage you, as you present at conferences and you have your posters and abstracts and things like that, definitely consider uploading those to the RCSI institutional repository so you can then start to track this type of attention and be your own kind of biggest advocate with sharing that online and trying to get people to view that important work that you're doing, so then they can cite you and repurpose it and things like that. So I just wanted to show you that. Okay, so let me see if there's any other things I wanted to show you in the advanced search. I think, I will show you, let me run that COVID-19 search, and I'll show you one more thing that you can do in Altmetric Explorer. Just rerun this search strategy here. Oops. Clear my fields. Oh, I'm not searching in the Pubmed. That's why it's doing that. Here we go. Oh gosh. Sorry about that. If you're getting weird results, you probably have something clicked in the advanced search. There we go, finally. Okay, so if you do craft any search strategies of fields that you really want to stay on top of that trending research, definitely consider running that search and then saving it. So if I click Save Search over here, it turns green. Then I can revisit my saved searches over here on the left-hand side in my saved searches little icon, that second one down. And so now your most recently saved search is always going to appear at the top of my screen. It's always going to have a really long title, long name, depending on your search criteria. So maybe this one, I just want to call it COVID-19 and pregnancy. Click Save. And now I can actually create or choose to receive a daily, weekly, and/or monthly email alert to your inbox. So maybe I want to do this like maybe every week in the case of COVID-19, but more realistically, perhaps every month. I just want to receive an email of the latest kind of trending research in this given area. So if I want to take a look at any of those papers in more detail, maybe I want to read them or see who's tweeting about them or sharing them online, you can actually just get that report directly delivered to your inbox. So then it takes some of the work out of that if you're trying to stay on top of some of that trending research. We also have a shareable report as well. I don't know if you'll use that as frequently in the case of trying to stay on top of trending research, but we do have a shareable report that you can, if you find something interesting, you wanted to, share it with your colleagues or a mentor or something like that, you could create this shareable report as well. But with our last 9 minutes here, I guess I will stop talking and see if there are any questions that have come up. No questions. Okay. Let me go back to slide deck. I'll put up my contact information. So if you do have any questions or want to learn more about how to use the Explorer database or anything like that, you can always email me at engagement@altmetric.com. Or if you're ever having any troubles with creating your login or anything like that, you can definitely email our support team at support@altmetric.com as well, and they'll get you sorted out with any troubles you might be having with that. Okay, so if there aren't any questions, I think we'll end it there.
Patty, for giving this talk. I'm sure it'll be of great use to many students, especially those who haven't heard about Altmetrics before. So thank you again for delivering this. And hopefully we can reach out to a lot more students at RCSI who weren't able to attend today by uploading this to our YouTube channel.
Yeah, great. I will follow up with you and get you that recording once it processes. So thanks everyone for your time and your attention. And yeah, if you have never heard of Altmetrics before, you're definitely not alone. So so you're ahead of the game if you're attending attending the presentation today or watching this at a later date. Okay, thank you very much and have a great day, everyone.
Great, thanks, Patty.